Welcome to the PA is In, the show created by PAs for PAs, where codependency with your supervising physician is a thing of the past, optimal team practice is the future, and physician associate has taken the place of physician assistant as the professional title of choice. I'm Tracy Bingaman, and I'm obsessed with redefining what success as a PA looks like and what it feels like. Here, you'll find the mindset shifts, systems, and processes I use to escape healthcare burnout and integrate my work and life. My mission is to help you grow into a unicorn PA who loves your job, has abundant energy, time to spare, and work optional financial freedom. The PA is in. And today we are talking all about navigating feedback, specifically negative feedback. Feedback is frustrating. There, I said it. Yes, of course, feedback, whether glowing or gutting, is certainly a part of life. It's part of our lives professionally, and it's part of our lives personally. Feedback is a necessary part of growth, but damn, is feedback, specifically negative feedback, frustrating as all get out. I have shared this often before because I want to normalize the fact that receiving feedback effectively without getting too defensive is really hard. It's a learned skill, and it's something that I'm still in the process of nailing down myself. On this show, oftentimes I teach what I need to learn and share what I wish someone had said to me along the way. This episode is one of those instances. Here is what we will cover on today's episode, all about navigating negative feedback. We will talk about why feedback feels so frustrating. I'm going to share with you the 4 questions to ask yourself when you get negative feedback, and then we're going to cover how to recover your confidence and fail forward. So here's why feedback is so frustrating. If you're into leadership learning, you're a manager or a leader within the organization you work at, you've probably learned about giving good feedback. Maybe if you precept students, you have evaluated how you're giving them feedback throughout their rotation or at their end of rotation evaluation. So you've learned how to direct those not so positive reviews that come as part of annual performance evals, or how to deliver feedback in a way that is both effective and collaborative. But the real art, I feel, is not giving the feedback. The real art is receiving negative feedback gracefully and effectively, and being able to do that without feeling defensive, pissed off, and personally attacked. This, for me, is absolutely a work in progress, and this is what we're going to focus on today, specifically being on the receiving end of negative feedback. I find feedback to be incredibly frustrating. And the reason that is because as human beings, we see feedback as a threat. Whether it's real or imagined, we see feedback as this threat to ourselves and to our success, to moving up in the organization, to being liked and accepted. And as humans, we have this baseline psychology that includes something called loss aversion. And because of loss aversion, we avoid feedback. So it's important to identify right from the get-go that these things exist in our mind. Whether it's we've realized it and named it in the past, it's happening in the background. So loss aversion is this phenomenon where we see a real or potential loss as more significant than the equivalent gain. So when it comes to feedback, this means that we see negative feedback as far and away outweighing any positive comments or compliments that we've received. Forbes says that we hear feedback as criticism, which our brains are hardwired to reject. They go on to say that because our brains are designed to protect us from being wrong, especially when we are wrong, we respond to criticism as if our very survival is being threatened. Does that resonate with anyone else? Someone gives you negative feedback and you have this visceral response that you're like, oh, absolutely not. That's not okay. That's not how I feel. That's not how it went down. And that you have this primal response to that, and that you really, it just doesn't resonate with you at all. Another reason we can find feedback to be so frustrating, and this thing that really makes the hairs on the back of our neck stand up, is because we generalize the feedback. So when we do this, we take one single piece of feedback that is often about our actions, and we take it to be an attack on who we are. We take the thoughts that someone else shared about one specific thing that we did, So, this generalization happens because of years and maybe even decades of us having the habit of finding meaning in what those around us say and do. This makes us feel even more defensive and even offended when feedback is provided. So, that, my friend, is why feedback pisses us off so much. Unless we do something about it, we will let feedback frustration fester, having made us angry, feel badly about ourselves, or we will start to attack the person who gave us the feedback, either out loud or inside of our own minds. And then when those things happen, the feedback you received will be ineffective and it's not going to improve our skills, abilities, whether professionally or personally. We are each fighting a battle between wanting to grow, learn, and get better at what we do to improve who we are and advance our professional skills, and also wanting to be loved and accepted just the way we are. These two things are in direct opposition to each other. If we were completely, wholly loved and accepted as we are, there would be no reason to give feedback. There would be no reason to get better, to change anything, and we would stay just the way we are. Conversely, if we only focus on wanting to grow and learn and advance ourselves professionally, we may feel like we aren't worthy of the income we earn, the praise that is given to us, or the thanks that our patients share with us. There's a difference between this internal inherent worthiness that a person possesses and the feedback that is given about our professional performance. Being aware of this difference can help us to reconcile this desire to grow and take that feedback seriously with the need to be loved and a part of a group. So, what do we do about feedback? From a very practical perspective, here are 4 questions to ask yourself when you get negative feedback. So, the 4 questions I want you to ask yourself the next time you get some negative feedback is: who is the feedback from? What does this feedback mean? How can I do things differently? And when can I improve this by? And when can I ask for more feedback on this topic? You can use this framework as a way to process, evaluate, and make changes if necessary as a result of the feedback you receive either professionally or personally. So, question number 1 to ask when you get some negative feedback is: who is this feedback from? Not all feedback is created equal, and the feedback that is most valuable comes from someone whose opinion you respect on a topic that they are knowledgeable about. The first thing to address when you receive this feedback is: who is this feedback from? Would you seek this person out for professional advice in the area addressed? If the answer to that question is a resounding no, take that feedback with the obligatory grain of salt. If the answer is yes, this is someone that you would ask advice of, whose opinion greatly matters to you, who has specific knowledge and expertise in this area, it's that's good to know from the get-go that the person giving you the feedback is someone whose opinion you value. Also, what type of person gave you the feedback? Is this your physician or your surgeon who, no matter how long you cut the suture or how short you cut the suture, it's either too short or too long? Is it someone who's incredibly difficult to please? Is this feedback coming from someone who is generous with criticism and slow or not at all generous with praise? Take a moment to evaluate what you know about the person who gave you the feedback. Doing this helps you to set the stage for how seriously you want to take this advice, this input, this information that they shared with you. And last but not least, when you're thinking about who gave you this feedback, is this someone that you've had a long term relationship with professionally, who knows you well and cares for you? Or is it someone that you've crossed paths with professionally for a relatively short amount of time, or just had this brief exposure and they've decided to offer you feedback from that short interaction? I want to take a moment here to make a note about strangers from the internet. The internet is a strange, magical place, but it is weird. And on the internet, everyone feels like their opinion holds massive weight. They think it's backed by science, and they think that their opinion about your situation or what you're doing is fact and that it really matters a lot. Digital courage and the lack of the ability to tell what someone's tone is in a comment combine to create the internet as this feedback free for all. And a lot of these comments are coming from literal strangers. It's people that you wouldn't recognize walking down the street, someone you definitely wouldn't call for advice, and can sometimes be a true stranger you've never met in person who literally you only know through the internet, or maybe you don't even know at all. If you were walking down the main street in your town and a literal stranger walked up to you and said, "You suck at your job. You should quit. It's ridiculous that you're not earning more. I earn more than you. You're so stupid." And then they just walked away. You would laugh. It would be weird and ridiculous, but it would be the most outrageous interaction. Well, that interaction is happening in the comment section of your favorite Facebook group right now. So take advice and feedback from strangers on the internet with like a whole shaker of salt. I would not take it seriously. People don't know you, and people who don't know you, who you don't respect their opinion, is not someone that you want to be taking feedback from. So, question one, who is the feedback from? Question two, what does this feedback mean? As I mentioned earlier, it's pretty easy to jump from someone saying something about what we did to feeling attacked at the very root of who we are when we get negative feedback. That single piece of feedback on a patient interaction, a conversation with a peer or a superior, and it's one piece of feedback on one specific instance. And we think the person saying it is criticizing who we are as a human being. When we look at what that feedback means, it's time to take a serious look at ourselves. Do you feel like this was a one time fluke, or is this something that you've been doing consistently that actually needs work? Is this truly an area of weakness where you need to focus and dedicate and improve? Or was this just a crappy series of events that wasn't ideal and led to a situation where you were not at your best? If you determine that the feedback means that you have work to do, that is where question three comes up. Question three is, how can I do things differently? So when you ask yourself this, I want you to walk through the scenario that you're in or a typical day. What could you do differently next time you're put in a similar situation? How can you, in advance, practice, prepare for, and feel ready to take a different set of actions next time? Because there will be a next time. It will not be the exact same situation, but something else will come up that's going to test your skills and ability in this particular area. Visualize yourself in that situation and practice, rehearse in your mind reacting differently, acting more quickly or more slowly, whatever you didn't do before that led to that feedback. And even if it's you internally saying, hey, that could have gone better. I could have run that code differently. I could have interacted with that patient differently. You can do this even with some internal feedback. And it's actually quite helpful if you find yourself with that negative dialogue and that voice in your head saying, you're so dumb, that was so stupid, that wasn't the best way to handle this. You can do this. How can I do that things differently next time? Exercise, even if no one actually gave you feedback and it's just yourself inside your own mind, kind of replaying or rethinking what happened. So the way that you answer, how can I do things differently, is to put together an action plan of proficiency and how to plan to change your reaction or skill set based on the situation that generated the feedback. Try really hard to separate the emotions you're having about the feedback you've received and ask yourself, what can I actually do to improve? Actually, let's take a moment to talk about those emotions. Getting feedback is emotional. My personal knee-jerk reaction when someone gives me feedback has always been to start running through a list of reasons in my mind why they aren't perfect and saying things like, who do they think they are to give me this feedback or to say that or to judge me in this way? When emotions crop up, which they absolutely will, instead of hopping on the train to Angry Town or Defensiveville, which is where I like to head, see the emotion and let it choose to let it pass you by. See the anger. Name the fact that you feel angry. See the defensiveness. Name the fact that you feel defensive and let it go. It's really hard to create an action plan for yourself, to be objective, to identify the steps to improve in a certain area if you're blinded with anger or defensiveness, or even just feeling sad, upset, and disappointed in yourself. It's okay to be upset when you're on the receiving end of feedback, but what we want to aim to do is to work through the emotions to the point where we can see the feedback clearly for what it is. It's information to use to make you better. So even when you get negative feedback and the person who delivered it isn't your favorite, even when you're upset that it needed to be said at all, maybe you're disappointed that your performance wasn't better. And even when you're working to improve, still, there will be negative feedback. That feedback is information to use to make you better. Unless you can get over this and start to accept negative feedback, to look at it objectively and to move forward, you're going to stay stuck clinically at the level you're at. You're going to stay stuck from an emotional intelligence perspective or a communications perspective, exactly where you are. Because feedback, even though it hurts our soul to receive, is so important. It's valuable information that we can use to make ourselves better. So the fourth question is kind of a two-part question. So it starts with when. When can I aim to improve this by? And when can I ask for more feedback on this topic? So let's start with when can I aim to improve this by? Setting a deadline makes those actions timely. Just like the T in SMART goals, a time-bound goal is more likely to be accomplished than if you don't tie it to a specific timing or a deadline. When is a reasonable amount of time to improve in this area? Is this a massive overhaul of skills that's going to take you a while, or a smaller tweak that you can start to work on in the coming days and weeks? Set a deadline, write it down, share it with someone who can lovingly hold you accountable when the time comes and ask you, did you do it? You're going to want to wrap up your feedback debrief going through these 4 questions with asking yourself, when can I ask for more feedback on this topic? So consider the specific scenario that generated the feedback. How often does this happen? When is it likely to happen again? So you're going to put together this action plan. You say when you're going to do it by, and then you decide, hey, when am I going to ask for feedback? Because it's oftentimes hard to assess ourselves in a situation. Like you might have thought it was great and someone gave you negative feedback. That person is actually, unless it's someone who you have a very like rocky relationship with, it's actually a good person to ask again in 3 weeks or 6 months. And you can decide when is reasonable to seek out that additional feedback to see, hey, I'm working on this. Have I improved in this area or not? As we wrap up and we're thinking about feedback specifically as a healthcare professional, it makes me think about medicine and human bodies and the physiology when it comes to feedback. So think about feedback instead of as a criticism or attack on you, think of it as a signal, just like inside the body. So physiologically, there are a ton of feedback loops that keep us alive and breathing and making the correct amount of thyroid hormone and excreting the right amount of sodium and potassium or reabsorbing the right amount of those electrolytes. Although renal pathophysiology certainly isn't my specialty, I do know that in the kidney, there are these loops that provide feedback to prompt an adjustment or change in the way that we're resorbing or excreting things back into our bloodstream or out into our urine. Think about feedback like those anatomic and physiologic feedback loops. Information comes in, adjustments are made, and homeostasis is achieved. Things improved based on the input of the feedback into the system. Think about this feedback, the criticism, or constructive comments as objective inputs into your system. It's not about you. It's about how much sodium there is. There's too much, there's not enough. You need to excrete more or less. Remember to practice not taking this feedback personally, and be careful to not generalize the feedback from one task you've performed or what you could have done differently to be about who you are. One piece of feedback does not define who you are or your abilities. Feedback is about what you've done. It is not about who you are. It's not an attack on your character or even feedback on all of your abilities. It's information to base your growth on and to narrow your focus for areas of improvement. And sometimes it's comments from a stranger on the internet, and you should try to just let it go. This is coming from a place of grace and a place of saying, hey, I'm not the best at getting feedback. I'm still working on learning to give feedback. Maybe that's an episode for another day. But if you find feedback frustrating and like it's hard for you to process, you are not alone. It's the way that your brain is wired. It's a survival mechanism. That anger, that defensiveness is a very normal response, but also having a set of tools to get over it. And by get over it, I mean see past the emotions to objectively evaluate. Is this feedback true? Is it applicable? Is it something that I can change? Is it just this person's opinion of me and I should let it go and keep doing what I know to be a great job? All of those things help us to process and work through this feedback so it's not something that festers and makes us mad and lose sleep and makes us come home from work fuming about what someone dared to say to us, even though they themselves are imperfect and they have areas that they could improve on too. Congratulations, you've just joined an elite club. By listening to a full episode of the PA is in, you are officially on the Unicorn PA team. Welcome aboard. What most team members do is they subscribe to the podcast because that allows them to automatically get the latest episode of the show. The life of your dreams exists on the other side of taking action. Keep taking those steps, keep making small shifts, and keep getting better. Your life will improve, your career will soar, and you will have the confidence you need to create your own success. I will see you in the next episode. This PA is out.